Okay, so we're going to go through a bit of an overview of blockchain, and hopefully that at the end of the session you'll understand what blockchain is, how it relates to cryptocurrency, and then how it might change the advertising industry. So we'll start with Ian. Do you want to explain what blockchain is, Ian?
Oh my God, that's a horrible picture.
There we go.
The blockchain. How many of you, quick show of hands, would say that they have a kind of expert level of knowledge about the blockchain? Anyone think they're really expert? No? Medium level? One or two? Just beginning, kind of heard of it, curious? All right, rest of you, what happened to your hands? All right. So there's many ways to describe the blockchain. I'm going to explain it from a non-technical point of view. The simplest way to think about it is that as internet technology has evolved, we've evolved around centralized systems, single servers or clusters of servers that share information. And we can share that information in the form of words, pictures, videos. And when we share it, we keep a copy on our hard disk, and the person who receives it gets a copy. So we're sharing a copy of things. And that's great for a whole class of use cases. But when we start to represent ownership, it falls over. Because if I want to represent the fact that I own $5 and I share it with a friend, I need the system to make sure that I am debited $5 and my friend is credited $5, so that I haven't just shared a copy of $5. And the only way to do that is in very complex centralized systems, which, as we see with people like Equifax and even the hack here in Singapore, the government lost a lot of medical data, that is prone to a lot of risk. So the blockchain evolved as a way to solve that problem. It's a distributed mesh architecture, so lots of servers all around the world running the same piece of software, often called Ethereum, using Ethereum as one example. And each machine stores a copy of every transaction. So no one company, no one individual, and interestingly, no one government can control what happens on the blockchain. So we get around the issues that governments and large organizations exploit their power to control what you can do. The blockchain removes their power to do that. And the blockchain allows for the representation of ownership. And that could be around currency, value, but it could also be around physical assets like golds or diamonds or rights, as in films or books or content. So it's going to enable a whole new generation of business models now that you've got an infrastructure that's operating globally, that's secure, and it's safe. About 3 minutes.
So how does blockchain relate to cryptocurrency, and do you need them both, or can you have one without the other?
Well, sorry, before we go into that, I'll dumb it down even more on the blockchain. It's like, it's a database, databases of transactions. There's a transaction between something or other. It could be renting a movie, it could be whatever or whatever. And it's just not stored in a couple of days. It's stored distributedly, and no one can change it. There's no hacking of it, right? At a base level, that's all it is. And there's technologies that are how to distribute this stuff and how to store it and wherever it and which servers and everything. But the idea is it's just stored. That's the technology. It's not new technology, right? It's new ways of implementing technology of database storage and all that kind of stuff. But it's not like this crazy, someone just invented this crazy stuff. The implementation of it is what we're getting to. Is the first implementation of it was the cryptocurrency, right? And then when people first heard of blockchain, it's along with crypto, along with Bitcoin and Ethereum, and they automatically think, oh God, this is this really weird, complicated blockchain thing that's tied in with the currency and everything, and oh my God, how am I going to learn this stuff? But let me buy some Bitcoins.
Dude, go out and buy some today.
and that's sort of, but separate the technology from the currency.
Correct. Blockchain is the technology. It's the architecture, it's the software, and this idea of a distributed ledger, a globally distributed ledger, right, that Joe was talking about. And just as Joe said, one of the first things that was built on top of that was a representation of value, of money. And that's what Bitcoin was a representation of value. And there's still a debate as to whether Bitcoin is a store of value. An example in traditional terms, what that would be gold. Gold as a store of value is a great way to keep and preserve your value. But not many of us are walking around with a piece of gold in our pockets to use to buy coffee, right? And that is a use of money which is called the means of exchange. And we tend to use cash or credit cards as a means of exchange. Bitcoin can do both. And so there's a debate, is it one, is it the other, is it both? And the reality is that it can do both, and all cryptocurrencies can do both. Be a very efficient means of exchange and be a very powerful store of value. One fact, if you had bought a US dollar 20 years ago, it would be worth 1/4 of what it was worth then, now. So holding cash is a very, very poor store of value. So the cash in your wallet, the cash that's held in your current account in your bank is basically evaporating, right? You should be doing something with it.
Cool. And there's a finite number of Bitcoins that will exist, right? Unlike some of the other cryptocurrencies.
That's right, yeah, because the governments like to do something they put people who do it themselves in jail for, which is printing money, right? If you do it for yourself, they put you in jail, but if they decide they need more, they print some more, and that's okay. But what that does is it devalues the money that you have in your pocket and in your bank account.
So let's talk about tokenization, because that's probably a good way to start to get into the applications. How would you describe tokenization as a word then, in relation to blockchain?
Okay. So remember I said that blockchain was a good way to have a distributed ledger of information about who owns what. And it's distributed, it's immutable, that's the kind of like the jargon for it's unhackable, unchangeable. And unchangeable, that's right. So it's a very secure way to keep track of who owns what. So what are people using the blockchain to keep track of? Well, Bitcoin is keeping track of money, but it turns out that there are many different types of asset classes which we're very familiar with, but have transactional issues. A good example would be fine art, right? Everyone knows that there is a Picasso, and that Picasso may be worth $10 million, but unless you've got $10 million, it's a binary decision. You either own it or you don't own it. And even if you do own it, once you own it, it costs you a fortune to store it and keep it secure. And then if you want to then sell it, it costs you a lot of money to get it to an auction process and to sell it, to liquidate it. So that becomes a rather illiquid asset. So there is a number of startups running at the moment which tokenize the ownership of fine art. So they buy the Picasso, they keep it and store it, and then they issue tokens to say, well, let's print 1 million tokens, shall we say. So we will divide up the ownership of that particular Picasso into 1 million parts.
So hopefully if the asset gets more valuable, your token's increase in value.
Correct, as the underlying asset appreciates. If you own 1/millionth of an appreciating asset, then you've got 1/millionth of that appreciation. But the beauty is that now you can choose to buy $1 worth of Picasso, or $10, or $100, or $200, or $1,000 worth of Picasso. And you can enjoy some of that appreciation of that particular asset class. And you can buy and sell it for virtually no cost on any of the crypto exchanges.
So
And
the application of a blockchain into a business or something is tokenizing, as in creating a value for whatever you say membership points or something like that. So instead of points, you have tokens. Now, how much that token is worth is then tied to a cryptocurrency, which maybe in real dollars, then real fiat currency. So not real dollars, real fiat currency. Is then tied to a Singapore dollar or something like that, right? But the idea of the token is that what you, as a business entity or whatever it is, provide. So in this case, Picasso dollars, because you own the asset in the Picasso, so it's Picasso dollars or Picasso tokens. Everyone likes to use the word tokens or coins. So then as a business, you create whatever, membership dollars, points, whatever, and that's your token. right? And you can issue a number of tokens, but that then is valued against something that you provide for that service, or in exchange for that service.
Nice.
Right?
Correct. And it could be any asset. So other organizations are tokenizing gold, right? So then you can own $1 worth of gold, or 10 or 20 or 1,000, and it turns gold into a means of exchange. Right?
That's probably more efficient than buying an EFT in gold.
Yeah.
Yep.
Other are tokenizing real estate. So they're taking kind of like the Singaporean concept of a REIT, tokenizing it, so that many people can participate in real estate. But this is not new. The concept was started by David Bowie in the 90s, when he took his catalog of work, bundled it up into an organization, into a private limited company, and he issued bonds, and he sold the bonds. It was called the Bowie Bond. And the Bowie Bond returned a dividend according to the royalties he got from his catalogue of works. That was the same structure, just used an old-fashioned means of doing it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at supply chain, perhaps in a more real example, for how blockchain would add efficiency, or how it's revolutionising supply chain.
I mean, it boils down to trust, right? When you talk about supply chain, is that if you buy something, do you know where it came from? Do you know that trace the path of where the various components were built, or if you're buying chicken, do you know it came from where it's supposed to be? Is it really organic, or whatever,
Free range.
Free range, or was it someone just slap it on there and throw it out there, right? So the application is about trust, right? And then when it comes to supply chain, it's like, okay, is everything along the supply chain, was it done properly, QC, QA, and all that stuff? And
Which helps
that's
product
the first
recall.
application.
Yeah, so you can help product recall.
Recall, I mean, as a consumer, you might want to know, as a retailer who's trying to sell stuff, and
Freshness.
yeah, and supply chain is everything from the new iPhones that come out to all that stuff, right?
So it's really important that it's generally thought of as provenance, right? To make sure that the product is coming from where it is. And that applies to many, many industries. The agricultural, coffee, there's startups putting blockchain and supply chain against coffee, so that we know that it's coming from fair trade palm oil. There's diamonds, to make sure that the diamond that you're getting your boyfriend to buy you for your engagement is not a blood diamond, right? It wasn't mined by kids somewhere in Africa. Right? You would want to know that, wouldn't you? So the blockchain provides that tracking for provenance of that. The other aspect about supply chain is that if you're, and it's not just kind of diamonds and coffee, but it's also like important parts, like parts for airplanes or helicopters, right? If I'm going to fly in a helicopter, I want to make sure that the parts that I bought from a distributor are genuine and not China copies that are going to fail while I'm over the ocean, right? So it applies to everything. The other aspect is, if you think about a very, very simple transaction, let's say there was a company that made coffee cups, and there was a shop that sold coffee cups, and they needed to order a truckload of coffee cups to restock, right? We take that one simple example, right? So the first piece of information flows is the order from the shop to the manufacturer. Then the manufacturer sends an order to the logistics company to say, I need you to come and make a delivery. And then they come and make a delivery, and then a piece of paper goes out saying that the delivery's been done, and then an invoice goes out, and then a payment instruction. So now we get a bank involved. And if you map the information flow that happens today, it's a nightmare of little bits of information, of shipping notices and invoices and orders. And it's reconciled by an army of accounts clerks that sit there with a photocopy machine and a staple gun. And we can eliminate all of that cost and friction. The reason it's there at the moment is because nobody trusts the data in somebody else's database.
Right, so the term here is disintermediation, right?
The blockchain means that you can have a single version of the truth, right? The order was placed and accepted, yes, no. For shipping, has the shipping been done? Yes, no. And the bank can see that, and they know, using a smart contract, that when the shipping has been completed, they are to make payment. And so we no longer need the bank to keep its own records. We no longer need the manufacturer or the retailer or the shipping company to keep their own records. They can all store their records on the blockchain, and no more reconciliation is needed.
So the idea is, for example, if a product is made out of 5 things, 5 items, right? And comes from different parts, different original equipment
Countries, yeah.
manufacturers, comes from that. If you wanted to, you could actually see who they are and if it actually came from them, right? As opposed to the end product switching it with something else,
Yeah.
right? And I was like, okay, it came from that component, that component. As a consumer, do you care? Maybe, maybe not, but the ability is that it's there,
Yeah.
right? And no one can change it. It's like all the data from the beginning of the journey of that component all the way through to the end product is there.
Cool. So let's get into advertising or marketing, which is why we're here.
Yeah.
How will blockchain disrupt the advertising exchange between publishers and advertisers?
So I was going to use the supply chain, say, well, we've been talking about the physical supply chain, but it also has relevance to the supply chain of how an advert ends up on your webpage as a consumer. And the way things work at the moment is there are, in most cases, many, many intermediaries between the brand that wants to make the advert appear and the consumer sitting on his phone or his laptop and receiving the advert. And the complexity of the infrastructure behind that has left that open to many issues. The biggest issue is the fact that actually the numbers never add up.
Ad fraud, right?
As well, even
You
just
never,
not
servers
they-
getting dropped, browsers not picking it up, ads being delivered. There's just, an ad server report from someone who's serving the ad
Doesn't match.
doesn't match with someone who said, I bought, this many ads, and my server, my report, says that I've only gotten this much. It never matches.
Right.
never matches, and that leads to suspicion because everyone is storing the data in their own database, and there is suspicion that they're perhaps adjusting the data. When you then get many intermediaries involved and you lose the transparency of who's touched this on the way through,
Yep.
then you get the opportunity for fraud to come in. So it doesn't work well even when everybody is honest. And unfortunately, in the digital advertising space, not everyone is honest.
It's not even that. I mean, it's gotten so complicated. Like, digital has gotten so complicated. So in the old days, you're a publisher. Let's say you own a magazine. Okay, I'll take the insertion order and I'll go through with it, right? Digital in the old days, you're Yahoo, you own the website. Okay, I want that ad. Okay, I'll serve that ad. That's easy. But as the industry sort of moved on, what you have is a publisher, say Singapore Press Holdings or whatever it is. They have a website. They get traffic. They take the ad server. They stick it to an exchange. Right? And they also stick it to another private exchange. And they say, well, why are we in one exchange? Why don't we just be in all three exchanges? Okay, we'll stick it through there. But we're also doing a direct deal with this, or put it through. Let's put it directly to the SSP instead of the supply side.
SSP?
Exactly, supply side platform. And then, some of the DSPs, demand side platform, will allow you to connect that too. So they're like, a publisher will stick their stuff everywhere, and they have partnerships with ad networks. What's an ad network? I have no idea anymore. Through various other resellers and partners, and their inventory of, say, 1 million page views is now spread across all the stuff. And at the buying side, right, you got an agency acting on behalf of a brand, coming in and say, all right, I'm going to go onto my DSP. It's demand side is what the agencies use. And I'm going to check on the rate for SPH. By the way, that's just one DSP. Let me check the other DSP. Let me check the other DSP as well. And eventually, somehow they make a booking by a million impressions. There's so many people along the way that how do you know that this transaction actually went through? And you know, you buy a million impression, SPH delivers 600,000.
Okay, so how does the blockchain fix that problem?
Well, there are two routes that are being explored. The first is basically trying to take the current structure of the industry and fix it by basically taking the data and publishing that data to the blockchain so that in every step of the supply chain, from the creation to the showing of the ad, each step of the way is being tracked through the blockchain, and that data can be inspected by everybody involved. So that's one approach, which is basically saying we'll use the blockchain's ability to store this data transparently to create transparency in the ad-serving industry. And that may well be
The problem
a good
is
idea.
all the players would have to opt in to do that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
many
I
of them will
think
be
that can be. I mean, I
disrupted by-
suspect that may well become customer driven, right?
Okay.
It doesn't take many customers like Unilever, P&G, and a few others to turn around and say, we won't spend money unless we have this ability to audit.
Yep, gotcha.
Right, and see. Because you know the big publishers, Facebook, Google, don't let the big, even the big guys audit, right? It's a level of lack of transparency there that people are asking for.
I mean,
the-
companies like us, we do tracking.
This is where he does what he does.
Well, not tracking. Right? We're an independent. We're not blockchain or anything like that. We're just independent. When someone books an agency books an ad on behalf of a client, they put our JavaScript tag in there, and we track wherever that appears. Right? And we do the fraud blocking, brand safety. We do this. So there's other companies out there that do the same. Now that's just we're a trusted party, but that's not
So blockchain's going to make you redundant.
I would say yeah. So you got to pay us. But blockchain as a whole is a reconciliation.
Yeah.
Right. It's not going to block anything. Right. The technology at the moment is too slow. Right. It's about after you've done it, and Joe says that 40% is fraud, and here's the blockchain that says, well, SPH only served 600,000 impressions, and these guys thought they bought 1 million impressions.
Who's right?
What are they going to pay for, and who do they pay, and what, and through all this, and so that you got to figure out. Blockchain will help settle that, the reconciliation of who should get paid. Should only pay the people who actually serve the ad, not other ad injection, fraudulent, other tons of things that are trying to say, hey, I've got an impression on SPH, but actually never delivered it.
So that's the model of kind of leaving the industry as it is, but trying to clean it up. But there's a whole group of other startups that are basically saying, how do I say this politely? It's completely broken, right? And there is no benefit from cleaning it up, and that ad blocking technology and the fact that people are choosing to subscribe to platforms like Netflix and avoid advertising is an indicator of the fact that the whole of the advertising industry is basically failing.
I hope not.
Well, I think that it is. I think it is. And so there's a very interesting one you might want to look up. It's called Brave. And their concept is that the consumer's attention
It's got a value.
is the scarcest resource. And we can value it by tokenizing a person's attention. And once we tokenize that attention, we can create an ecosystem, an economy. And because it's tokenized and on the blockchain, we can build a new infrastructure that connects advertisers and publishers and browsers and consumers together. And the startup is, their head of technology is a guy that wrote JavaScript. So they've got some grunt behind them. The browser is called Brave, And one of the things that it allows you to do as a consumer is to define which categories of advertiser you're willing to see advertising from. So example, I've just bought a car. I haven't, but if I had, once I've just bought the car, I really don't want to see any more car adverts. And if last week I'd been on a couple of car websites, I will now otherwise be retargeted for months with car adverts. I bought it, so stop already, right? So I want the ability to have control. I'm not interested in, this category, that category. So they can block by category. That's interesting. The other interesting concept is to say, these brands I like, they may present content to me for free because I value the content they provide to me. Their content is interesting and valuable.
So the ad's no longer an ad, it's content.
These other brands, don't really like them, but maybe. But you know what? If they want to present me with information, they have to pay me. And the token infrastructure allows for very small micropayments where brands can start to pay for attention.
And there's potential models where different people have different values for their attention, depending on their influence.
Yeah,
So-
I see that being there as, but I don't see it taking over the whole sort of advertising ecosystem. I mean, it'll be there. Just like when Opera came up with their browser, and they said, okay, we can block, all advertising, right? And then people started loading on block all advertising. But then Opera went out and started saying, hey, Mr. Publisher, do you want to show your ads? You got to pay me. Right, and then it was like, so there has to be they have to monetize it somehow, and I think it'll be a while before the industry sort of moves that way.
Oh yeah, it's not going to be tomorrow. But I think if you expect this to happen this day, this week, this month, no. 3 years time, 5 years time, I think we'll be seeing a completely different infrastructure.
Potentially the royalty of an article that is written could end up going back to the author.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone who converts an article into a smaller piece of content, a mashup, could get an income from their value add to a piece of content.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes for questions. Does anyone have any questions on blockchain advertising, whether they're going to have a job or not? Apparently, blockchain job vacancies are up 50% in Asia from last year.
We're hiring.
Ian's company is in that space, so yeah.
Yeah, hi. As the blockchain experts, I want to know, how do you see the future of blockchain? Is it like they're killing the banks, or the banks will try to integrate their system with blockchain?
Yeah.
You're talking crypto or blockchain?
Crypto, I mean, in terms of cryptocurrencies.
Okay, so I think the question is, if I understood you, is you're a blockchain expert, and you're saying, how do we see the future of blockchain and cryptocurrency and the banks? Right. I'll kick off, and then I'm sure we'll have 3 different points of view. I'm quite a revolutionary. I think the banks are arrogant. I think they're bloated. I think they are some of the most intensely uncustomer-centric organizations. I think, and the stats are there, of all of the service providers to the public, the banks have the lowest net promoter score, with people's willingness to recommend of anything, even compared to airlines and hospitals. I think we as consumers are just desperately waiting for an alternative for services compared to the banks. And the banks will die, hopefully, painfully, a death by 1,000 cuts, as one by one in other organizations will start to shave away parts of their business, and they will lose that. Will they evolve and incorporate the blockchain? Absolutely not. I would put billions, if I had it, on a short bet on that.
As a technology, they are saying they're doing it as a technology, but but we were talking about disintermediation before, right? So it's about value, right? So I work, I get paid, and I go and I buy something. It's a value exchange between me and someone else selling a product. And in between, there's Visa, MasterCard, my bank, and their bank, or their, there's like all these things in between, right? And that's the idea of that is, what if we get rid of those? Will we not have to pay that 5%, that 3%? Will the cost be cheaper? Will the value of what I do, and we were talking about this before, about if I carry money across different countries and all that stuff, do I need to do exchange rates and do whatever, unless the banks can deal with that eventually, which like I have a certain value in a certain coins, and I want to be able to just buy that without going through a middleman. And the banks are a middleman until they... Loans are another one, right? You need the banks because you need to borrow money to pay. But if, there's probably a new infrastructure that comes up that could be, a bunch of people who could loan you something that you can...
Which there are many. But look, I mean,
We had another
this is not
question about,
specifically about the fact that banks are bad. They have become bad. Why? Because they are government-granted monopolies. And they have been given exclusive rights to perform various services. And they've been able to be fabulously profitable. And so they have attracted the sort of people who wanted to make very high salaries. And all of this is a result of the fact that there has not been an open, competitive market. Right? The blockchain and cryptocurrency punches a hole through that. But the same story is happening in the media industry, where the national broadcaster, which has been given a government-granted monopoly to eyeballs on television, right? They also became big, very profitable, rather bloated. And they also are finding it very hard to transform against the searing heat of small startups that are trying, experimenting, and figuring out how to be exceptionally efficient at the business. So it's not just banking, it's many industries. I would say any industry where either has been government-granted monopoly rights or huge barriers to entry because of capital cost. Right? Those sectors will suffer the most.
They'll move into property.
Lawyers.
They already own a bunch of buildings as SPH owns a bunch
we
of
might
buildings.
leave it there, unless, do you want to do that last
Any
question?
more questions?
So I kind of heard the talk. So
Sorry, audio, can you help the sound?
hello, better
Yes,
now?
can hear you now.
Okay. So we all understand, basically the blockchain, the way it works with the financial industry, with the, the ledgering and everything. So while I was, hearing through the panel, basically, talking about how blockchain can be used, can you maybe, just for more clarity, give an example as to how you can use blockchain with advertising or maybe, marketing content? An example would actually, we would be able to, at least I would be able to, connect to the technology, to the, the marketing phase of it.
Wow, okay, big question.
How about how the value of an impression changes depending on the engagement that it
Yeah, that's right.
generates?
So I guess there are many areas. The first one is the one that we briefly talked about, which is thinking about the steps that are taken that are required at the moment before a banner ad is served to a person. And thinking about the information that is used to determine whether to show you this banner ad or that banner ad to be published to the blockchain so that everybody in the supply chain can use that information, and at the end, the advertiser can audit and inspect to make sure that their money was spent properly. Right. So that would be the first example that I would give as a use of blockchain.
I would say,
in the
even
industry.
before going to the consumers and trying to understand the consumers and verifying the consumer, it would be interesting if the industry, gets together. Let's, and just, the agency, different agency group, different publishers get together, create a blockchain, and it doesn't, you know, and it doesn't have to be in, you know, 20,000 servers. You
So
know,
you
it
can
could
do it in
be,
your role as the IAB.
it could, yeah, it could be in servers that, you know, the industry sets up with both sides of the publisher and the agency side, and all the stuff that agree to set up their own servers around there. And then as things, as the transaction goes through, you know, it just populates the blockchain. And within just that ecosystem, you have a verification of something that's being delivered versus fraud, right? I would say that's like one of the first steps before we get far enough to go into verification of people, because that's really a bigger one.
All right, well, we're out of time, but if you've got further questions, come and see me at the stand, or Jay might be hanging around.